Big Meech just turned 58 years old, and the life he is living right now is heartbreaking. This is a man who once controlled one of the most powerful criminal organizations in American history, who threw parties with live tigers and elephants in attendance, who pulled up to nightclubs in exotic cars with stacks of cash and an entourage that filled every room he walked into. Now he is living a reality nobody would have predicted from someone who once stood exactly where he stood. The luxury is gone, the empire is gone, and the full story of how it all came crashing down has never actually been told the way it deserves. Today we are ripping back every layer of this, because what really happened to Big Meech, his money, and his future is far more shocking than any viral clip has shown you. Yo, what's good, fam? Welcome back. Today we are diving into the real story behind one of hip-hop culture's most legendary and controversial figures. We are talking verified court records, documented timelines, and the full picture behind a man whose name still sends shockwaves through the culture, even nearly 2 decades after he was locked away. Big Meech. Let's get into it. Before we get into where he stands today, let's make sure everybody is locked in on who this man actually is and why his story still hits hard in 2026. Demetrius Edward Flenory was born on June 21, 1968, in Detroit, Michigan. He grew up on the west side of the city alongside his younger brother, Terry Lee Flenory, who the streets came to know as Southwest T. The Flenory brothers did not come from wealth. Their father, Charles Flenory, was a carpenter and musician who later passed away in July 2017. Their mother, Lucille, eventually became the CEO of an organization called Building More Families in Michigan. These were not the sons of kingpins, but of working-class Detroit, and they chose a far more dangerous path. By the time the two brothers were teenagers, they had already slipped into the drug trade on Detroit's streets, starting small, selling $50 bags of cocaine while still in high school. Most people would have stayed at that level and never gotten out. The Flenory brothers were built differently, and their operation refused to stay local or small. It refused to stay small. Over the late 1980s and throughout the 1990s, Demetrius and Terry built what federal prosecutors would eventually call one of the largest cocaine trafficking organizations in American history. They called it the Black Mafia Family. The streets called it BMF. By the time the organization hit its peak in the late 1990s and early 2000s, BMF was moving cocaine across multiple states. Federal records document activity in Alabama, California, Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, Louisiana, Michigan, Mississippi, Missouri, North Carolina, Ohio, and Tennessee. The brothers split the operation strategically. Demetrius ran the Atlanta hub, which became the beating heart of BMF's distribution network and its highly visible public presence. Terry set up the Los Angeles side to manage incoming shipments tied to Mexican cartel supply lines. It was a nationwide operation, run with a structure that law enforcement would later call sophisticated and disciplined. But here is exactly where Big Meech became something far beyond a mere drug trafficker. He became a cultural phenomenon. While his brother ran a low-key operation out on the West Coast, Demetrius leaned fully into the spotlight. He launched BMF Entertainment as a promotional arm of the organization, throwing out-of-control events, hosting rappers and athletes, and moving through Atlanta's nightlife scene with a flash that made him impossible to ignore. He became synonymous with the city's club culture. He was the man who brought live tigers and elephants to his own birthday party. He was the man whose very presence at a venue turned it into a major event. Rick Ross referenced it years later on a track, rapping about the night Big Meech brought the tigers in, treating it like a landmark moment in hip-hop history. That is the level of mythology this man built around himself. Federal investigators estimated that BMF's cocaine operation pulled in roughly $270 million in drug proceeds from the late 1990s through 2005. That number has been widely reported by outlets including the Associated Press and TMZ. Meech's personal net worth at the height of his reign has been cited by celebrity net worth sites at around $100 million. Whatever the exact figures, the wealth was real enough to be seen by everyone around him. Luxury vehicles, custom jewelry, extended trips, VIP tables at every major venue across the South. He was building a brand in real time, and that brand had grown bigger than almost anything most people in his world had ever seen. Now here is where it gets real. because none of that money was ever sitting safe in a bank account, waiting for him to come home. In October 2005, after a 2-year coordinated federal investigation codenamed Operation Motor City Mafia, led by the DEA Special Operations Division, federal agents stormed in and arrested Demetrius Flenory along with more than 100 other individuals tied to BMF. The scope of the entire takedown was absolutely massive. The investigation had been building since October 2003, and it involved surveillance, informants, large drug seizures, and wiretap communications. When the government finally pulled the trigger in 2005, they did not just arrest people. They dismantled an entire empire. Demetrius and Terry Flenory pleaded guilty in 2007 to operating a continuing criminal enterprise involving the large-scale distribution of cocaine across the United States from 1990 to 2005. In September 2008, a federal judge sentenced both brothers to 30 years in federal prison. Big Meech was convicted of running a continuing criminal enterprise and money laundering. He was sent away at the age of 40. He would not see the outside of a cell for nearly 2 decades. And what about the money? Federal asset forfeiture law is one of the most powerful, most brutal tools in the government's arsenal. When the feds build a case against a criminal enterprise this size, they do not just take the people. They take everything connected to the criminal activity. Cash, vehicles, jewelry, real estate, any asset prosecutors can tie to criminal proceeds is subject to seizure and forfeiture. In a case the size of BMF, with proceeds estimated in the hundreds of millions, asset forfeiture became a central weapon in the government's strategy. During the October 2005 raid alone, federal agents seized $2 million in cash, along with weapons, cocaine, and other assets. And that was just one raid. By the time the full case was prosecuted, the financial dismantling of Big Meech's empire had been every bit as thorough as the criminal case itself. Let that sink in for a minute. This is the part too many viral videos skip right over. Now let me break this down for y'all, because this is where the story turns genuinely shocking. When Big Meech walked out of that federal prison and into a halfway house in Miami, he did not walk into money. He came home broke. A man who once sat on top of a $270 million empire, who had cars and jewelry and real estate stacked to the ceiling, came home with nothing, and the streets have been buzzing about why ever since. There are 2 brutal, distinct sides to this entire story. The first is what the government did. When Big Meech was arrested in 2005, the federal government moved instantly to seize everything connected to BMF: cash, properties, vehicles, jewelry. Federal asset forfeiture is one of the most powerful legal weapons federal prosecutors have, and in a case the size of BMF, they used it to its absolute limit. The fortune was gone long before he ever had a chance to think about coming home. That part most people already know, but here's exactly where it gets darker. Because while Big Meech was sitting in a federal cell, his son was out here living large. Demetrius Flenory Jr., known as Lil Meech, landed the starring role in 50 Cent's hit Starz series BMF, playing his own father on television. The show blew up in a major way, and with that success came serious money. But according to reports from hip-hop media outlets and commentary from insiders, including Tony Yayo, who spoke publicly on the matter, Lil Meech allegedly tore through massive portions of those earnings. We're talking $100,000 on 10 pairs of custom Chrome Hearts jeans, a $500,000 diamond BMF chain, living at a level matching the myth of the name he carried on screen, without building anything to sustain it. And 50 Cent, in the middle of his very public falling out with the family, said it flat out. He publicly claimed he helped the Flenory family earn over $5 million in legitimate television revenue. Then he dropped the line that hit hardest: "It's not my fault it's all gone." He went even further, publicly accusing Big Meech of having to borrow his own son's jewelry just to take photos. Whether every detail of that claim checks out or not, what 50 Cent put on record painted a brutal, unflattering picture. A man who came home to discover the money had already moved on without him. Now, to be fair, Lil Meech earned that money himself through the show. It was never his father's money to begin with. The federal government had already wiped out the BMF fortune before Lil Meech ever cashed his first check. But what the streets took from all of this is simple. Big Meech stepped back into a world where his own son had millions, burned through them fast, and Big Meech came home with nothing to show for any of it. That is the part that stings, and it's the part that has kept echoing ever since he walked out of those prison doors. Then came the reports about Big Meech reaching out to major names across the industry. Canadian rapper Top 5 publicly claimed in a leaked exchange that Meech had reached out looking to borrow money. 50 Cent piled straight on, posting a private DM Big Meech had allegedly sent to an actor from the Power franchise, suggesting they worked together. 50 rejected it publicly and dismissively, and the whole episode got spun into a narrative. A man who once had everything now sliding into people's inboxes chasing a comeback, whether that reading is fully accurate or not. And some of those contacts were clearly about legitimate business, not desperation. Still, the optics were brutal. The contrast between who Big Meech was at the height of BMF and who he appeared to be in those moments was the kind of thing that breaks a legend's image in real time. And that is the reality Big Meech is living right now. Whatever the specific dollar amount sitting in his account, the documented public picture is of a man who came home to far less than the world expected, navigating that gap in full, unforgiving view of everyone who ever said his name in admiration. Let's get into the release itself, because this is where Big Meech's current reality begins to take real shape. On October 15, 2024, the Federal Bureau of Prisons confirmed that Demetrius Flenory was transferred from FCI Coleman Low, a low-security federal correctional institution in Wildwood, Florida, into community confinement overseen by the BOP's Miami Residential Reentry Management Office. According to reporting from TMZ, confirmed directly by the Bureau of Prisons, Big Meech was placed in a halfway house in Miami to serve out his remaining sentence under tightly structured conditions. His attorney, Brittany K. Barnett, co-founder of the Buried Alive project, released a statement saying she was overjoyed by her client's release, and that he had used his time in prison to focus on personal growth and transformation, and now had the chance to begin a new chapter. According to Bureau of Prisons records, his scheduled full release date is January 27, 2026. But walking into a halfway house is not freedom, not in any conventional sense of the word. According to a follow-up TMZ report, Big Meech was required to serve 5 years of supervised release once his halfway house term concludes. He was also required to complete a substance abuse program. The conditions of his release included supervision and monitoring requirements that would sharply limit his movements, his business activities, and his ability to operate independently. He came home to a world that had transformed completely in the time he was away. Social media platforms that did not exist when he went in are now central to the music industry and popular culture. The smartphone in the average person's pocket in 2024 is more powerful than anything that existed in 2005. The entire landscape of celebrity, entertainment, and public visibility had been rebuilt while he sat behind bars. The first image that surfaced after his transfer showed Big Meech in street clothes, standing next to his barber, looking calm and serious. It was a small, quiet moment, but it went everywhere fast. Because this man's name still carries that kind of weight, the celebrity world responded to his release with immediate, explosive enthusiasm. Rick Ross took to social media and declared the streets back, Meech home. Boozy Badaz wrote, "Welcome back," across his accounts. Sexy Y Red offered to perform at his welcome home party for free. The hip-hop world treated his release as a major cultural event, and in many ways it was. But here's exactly where it gets complicated. Because not everyone in that world was rolling out the red carpet. 50 Cent had been instrumental in keeping Big Meech's legacy alive through the BMF television series on Starz. The show first premiered in 2021 and ran for 4 seasons. It starred Lil Meech in the lead role as his own father. Snoop Dogg, Eminem, 2 Chainz, Lil Baby, and dozens of other major names appeared across the run of the series. 50 had built a genuine cultural monument around the BMF name, and Big Meech and his family had benefited significantly from that visibility. But in early February 2025, Big Meech appeared in a promotional video alongside Rick Ross to hype a welcome home concert planned for February 13th in Sunrise, Florida. Rick Ross had a long documented rivalry with 50 Cent stretching back to 2009. The moment Big Meech linked up with Ross publicly, 50 did not hesitate. He immediately hit Instagram and posted a photo of a rat alongside the lyric from Ross's own song, "I Think I'm Big Meech," turning a tribute line into pure mockery. The implication of betrayal was unmistakable. The feud exploded from there. 50 publicly accused Big Meech of cooperating with federal authorities, all but calling him an informant and referencing alleged paperwork tied to a former BMF associate named Tammy Cowens. He posted publicly that he had helped the Flenory family earn over $5 million legally and blasted Big Meech for not investing more in his son's acting career. He publicly leaked private text messages between himself and Lil Meech. He even posted a fake GoFundMe page mocking Big Meech's shrinking finances. He even posted a crude, photoshopped image of Lil Meech holding an out-of-work sign after Starz canceled the BMF series following its 4th season. Big Meech eventually addressed the situation publicly, though he never named 50 Cent directly. "'Cause I'm not trying to let nobody trick me off the streets. But I never folded, never told, never will." His response, as reported by multiple outlets, "I was not going to address this because I'm not trying to let nobody trick me off the streets. I never folded." He shut down the informant allegations without escalating the public back and forth into territory that could jeopardize his release conditions. 50 Cent's accusations about cooperation remain just that, allegations. Big Meech has denied them publicly, and no verified court documents confirming the specific claims 50 referenced have been made fully public as of this writing. Fans and observers remain sharply divided on what the paperwork 50 referenced actually proves, with many commenters pushing back hard in 50's own comment sections, challenging the credibility of the entire framing. Former G-Unit member Young Buck publicly sided with Big Meech and warned 50 to back off, a warning 50 openly mocked. The game publicly weighed in. Even 50's own estranged son, Marquise Jackson, jumped on social media to comment on the situation. The entire hip-hop world had an opinion on it. The Welcome Home concert ultimately never happened. Reports indicated at the time it was canceled for circumstances never fully publicly detailed. 50 Cent seized on the cancellation as fresh ammunition in his social media campaign against Big Meech. The BMF series was subsequently canceled by Starz after 4 seasons, with network cost concerns cited as the primary reason, alongside documented tension between the show's executive producer and the family it was built around. Whether the behind-the-scenes conflict actually drove the cancellation remains a matter of reporting and inference, not confirmed internal Starz communications released to the public. Now, let's talk about how Big Meech actually lives today, because this is exactly where the viral narratives diverge most sharply from what can actually be verified. So what does life really look like for Big Meech right now? He is living under strict federal supervised release, with conditions attached to nearly every move he makes. He is fighting hard to rebuild from the ground up after nearly 20 years inside. He has been photographed alongside figures like Rick Ross and Floyd Mayweather Jr., exploring opportunities across entertainment, media, and branding. His attorney has stated publicly that he used his time inside to focus on personal growth and that a new chapter now lies ahead. And the BMF name, regardless of what happened to the Starz series, still carries enormous cultural value that can still be monetized through appearances, consulting, and media projects. But the road ahead is far harder than it looks from the outside. And the 50 Cent situation made it dramatically harder. When that feud went public, it did not just create bad press. It actively destabilized the very income streams Big Meech was counting on. The BMF concert got canceled. The show got canceled. 50 Cent publicly picked apart every move he made and every person he reached out to. For a man trying to rebuild legitimate income under federal supervision, that kind of public sabotage carries real, lasting weight. But there are real constraints on it. Federal supervised release is not a minor formality. For 5 full years after his halfway house term ends, Big Meech will answer directly to federal authorities. His movements, his associations, his activities, all of it will be monitored. His ability to operate freely in business, to travel, to appear publicly without answering to the system is sharply restricted throughout the release period. The substance abuse program adds yet another layer of ongoing obligation. He is not a free man in the way most people who have never touched the federal justice system understand freedom to mean. That brutal contrast between the life he lived at the peak of BMF and the heavily monitored, constrained life he navigates today is exactly what commentators and fans point to when they call his situation sad. Not just the financial picture, which remains genuinely murky in the specifics, but the daily reality of a man who once moved through the world with absolute authority and now has to check in with a federal supervision officer. A man who once controlled a $270 million operation and now has to account for his whereabouts and associations to government supervisors. A man who once ruled an era of street wealth and celebrity proximity and now lives under the microscope of non-stop federal oversight. That is the real contrast. That is what this whole story is pointing at. It's also worth stepping back to look at what Big Meech's story reveals about the long-term consequences of federal incarceration at this scale. This isn't about romanticizing what BMF was or what it did, because the cocaine trade that funded that lifestyle caused real, devastating harm in real communities. But it is worth understanding what 2 decades behind bars does to a person's future. The financial consequences here are severe, and they simply don't fade. Federal asset forfeiture strips away the wealth entirely. Nearly 20 years of lost legitimate earning time means no retirement savings, no investments, no compounding assets. The supervised release period piles on even more restrictions over what can be built and how fast. Family relationships strained hard under that kind of separation often carry permanent damage. Big Meech missed his son growing from a 5-year-old child into a 24-year-old man with his own career and his own identity. He missed his father's death in 2017. He missed an entire era of culture, technology, and social change unfold without him. Coming out on the other side of that isn't like waking up from a long sleep. It's like stepping into a world rebuilt around you without a single ounce of your input. Business opportunities carrying the Big Meech name now come with federal scrutiny attached. Every public appearance, every deal, every association is potentially subject to review by the people overseeing his supervised release. That reality turns straightforward business moves, executive producing content, building a brand, public appearances, into something far more complicated in practice than they look. People watching from a distance see a legendary name and assume every door is wide open. The people inside that process know it's a different story. There's also a psychological dimension to re-entry that almost never gets discussed. After nearly 2 decades inside a rigidly structured institutional environment, adjusting to the speed and demands of everyday civilian life is not some simple transition. The speed at which information now moves, the way a single photograph can completely reshape a narrative within hours. None of that existed in the world Big Meech left behind in 2005. Navigating all of that while managing federal supervision requirements and the intense public spotlight attached to his every move is a pressure that very few people will ever fully understand. This same broader pattern applies to thousands of people walking out of long federal sentences. Every Big Meech's name isn't one many people carry. Out of everyone released from prison this year, even though they're all facing the same broken system, just without his resources or opportunities. His story feels different because the details make it a unique case, but in reality, it speaks for thousands of people living quiet, unnoticed lives. That combination, an unforgettable individual wrapped up in a universal struggle, is exactly why every new update on him pulls in millions of views and thousands of comments overnight. Because Big Meech wasn't just a dealer who got caught. He turned an entire criminal operation into a cultural phenomenon, immortalized in hip-hop lyrics, referenced in Grammy-winning records, played on repeat in one of Rick Ross's biggest anthems. And now his own son is playing his role on screen for a new generation. He built a legacy so massive that it was waiting for him the moment he walked out of prison. That's why every appearance, every photo, every post, every headline instantly becomes news. It's not about what he's doing today. It's about the weight of a name that's always carried that kind of power. And the gap between that legendary past and his current supervised reality is so jarring, so raw, so human, that people can't look away. The truth is, the government wiped out the fortune. Whatever money came after disappeared just as fast, and Big Meech came back to a world that had already moved on without him. This isn't just about money, it's about something far bigger than that. 20 years gone, an empire shattered into pieces, a family broken under the pressure. And now a 58-year-old man is trying to stand back up in a world that barely recognizes him. Right now, Big Meech is 58, living in Miami under federal supervised release, trying to rebuild from a position completely different from the empire he once had. Will this become a real comeback story, or just another example of the permanent price of a federal conviction? That answer hasn't been written yet. He's still here, still moving, making headlines with every step. The story isn't over. So what do you think his next move should be? Drop it in the comments. And if you want the real, untold stories behind hip-hop's biggest names, hit that subscribe button now, because there's a lot more coming.